Welcome, everyone. It's the Crypto Lark, and I'm very excited to have with me today Ruben from Zcoin. Ruben, how's it going?
Good, doing very well. It's a great time in Malaysia. Just woke up.
Good morning. Now, today in our conversation, we're going to primarily be talking about privacy implementations, trying to achieve privacy in a world that's ever trying to impede on your privacy, particularly in the realms of technology. We're also going to touch a bit on the community in Southeast Asia, and of course, what Zcoin is doing. But I want to start off with a very basic question to you: is why does privacy even matter? I mean, I'm not doing anything wrong, right? So why does privacy matter?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the most common misconception of privacy. People think that, if I have done nothing wrong, if I have nothing to hide, I have nothing to fear. And actually, the person who said that is Joseph Goebbels, who was like a Nazi, like one of the top guys in the Nazi party. But I think an easy way to view privacy is that don't view it as hiding something. It is the ability to choose what to review. I think that's the right way to view things. And only now in the past few years with scandals like Facebook or like even with Coinbase, we can't trust corporations with our data, with our privacy, because they suck at it. Even banks have leaked the data, and Coinbase, apparently recently said that, oh, there was customer data leaks and no one knew about this, right? And do we are we first of all, happy to trust organizations with our private data? And the second thing is that, do we want a system where governments, authorities have full knowledge of how we are spending our money? That sounds great if you trust the government, if they're totally benevolent. But with so much power comes abuse. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you have an authoritarian government, I want to regulate how you think, how you do things. That's where you need privacy. And we feel that, the whole idea of Bitcoin is to be kind of like an alternative to traditional money or fiat money. And if you have a money that's not private, it's effectively censorable, and that's why we feel that privacy is really important if you want to be a true sort of decentralized currency. Yeah.
I remember a quote from, I think it was from Fluffy Pony from Monero, and he was saying that basically something along the lines of privacy's a continual battle. There's no one technological implementation that'll work forever, essentially. And so,
Definitely.
can we ever actually achieve like real privacy of money? In Because at some point, right? Think your money in order to buy Zcoin, for example, I've got to send money to an exchange, and then the exchange reports that I buy Zcoin to someone. So,
Well, there's like varying degrees of privacy, right? We're not trying to protect like those people are doing illicit activity or things. I mean, yeah, if people want to use that for that, fine. But we're trying to protect like the everyday guy against mass surveillance, right?
mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I can buy from the exchange. I buy a couple of Zcoin and I spend it. Yeah, people know that I bought Zcoin, but they don't know, when the person who's receiving the money from my Zcoin doesn't know where it's from, doesn't know that it's from Binance, doesn't tie it to a real life identity. And that's the kind of privacy that we're looking at. And I do think that's really interesting that you say like, yeah, privacy is not like you cannot just achieve it and that's it, right? Like especially things with like quantum resistance and
Mm-hmm.
things that come into play. And that's kind of an interesting topic because stuff like Monero, like Mimblewimble, when quantum stuff comes about, your transactions will be retroactively de-anonymized. So is your history 10 years ago or 20 years ago worth anything to people? I might think it might be. For zero knowledge proofs, it's a bit different that yes, you with quantum computing, you can forge coins out of thin air, but I don't think you can break the privacy. As far as I know, which I spoke to a couple of cryptographers who said, yeah, the anonymous property still exists, but you can forge coins out of thin air, and I think that's an important distinction there.
Yeah, the maintaining privacy, I think, is really what is of key importance, and we see it's a constant battle right now between, you know, people who are developing new technology, and there's constant implementations coming to the different cryptocurrency projects, just as one example. But we can look at right across the spectrum of different tech companies that are trying to resist government intrusion. And we saw recently in Australia, they passed the, I think it's the Assistance Access Bill. Which, do you know about this?
I've read it briefly. Like basically, like, you have to assist the government to surveil, all this type of stuff, right?
Basically, that's it. And if you're a developer of an app, for example, the government can come to you and say, build a back door. And if you don't
Yep.
build a back door, you can go to prison and get fined. And if you tell anyone that the government told you to build a back door, you can go to prison and get fined. And
Yep.
so are you worried about something like that happening in, your jurisdiction in Malaysia? I mean, what if the Malaysian government did something like that? Would you have to, give up Zcoin or, move to Thailand?
Well, first of all, we're an open source project, right? And even if we are all forced to stop, officially working for it, I'm hopeful that people will take up the cause on this. I mean, like for example, if something like Monero or like Zcash, well, Zcash is a bit harder, but like something like Monero, where it's community based, even if the like main guys have to go into hiding, the development will continue. And I think that's the beauty of open source code, and that's kind of like the redundancy built in. It would suck, but hopefully we reach a stage where there's enough people interested in the coin that would take over regardless what happens to us or not. And I think that's one of our kind of end goals with Zcoin. Yeah.
I think that's one of the amazing things, though, is the open source community, because governments are trying to play this game right now where they're running around trying to take privacy here and take privacy there, but there's enough people out there who care about privacy to say, hey, you know what? No, we're going to build technological implementations here. So even if you pass laws in that country, well, someone in another country can do it. Or, I'm sure that there's plenty of very tech savvy Australian programmers who are able to build things in Australia quite easily and get around government surveillance. I mean, it's definitely
Yep.
possible without a doubt. And so it's this constant game of cat and mouse with the government trying to find your privacy and everyone else trying to evade it. It's weird. We put these people in power and then they spend all their time trying to steal our data and our privacy, and it's kind of weird. Why do we do
Well,
this
like,
still?
like for example, in Japan, where they actually ban privacy coins, like they are one of the few countries that said privacy coins are bad. We're banning them, and it was very interesting because it was not in response to any illicit activity. It was in response. It seemed to be a response because CoinCheck got hacked and Nem was stolen, which had nothing to do with privacy. Nem doesn't have
Yeah.
privacy features at all, and they just wanted to be seen as doing something and do this gut reaction because no Monero was involved, no Zcash was involved, no Zcoin was involved, but they're like, oh yeah, it could facilitate. It could facilitate, but it didn't. In this particular instance, it didn't. And actually, like, when I speak to regulators about privacy coins, I basically told them you have two options. You can either regulate it or you can ban it. And if you ban it, effectively what you're doing is you're pushing it into the dark. You're forcing them to create DEXs and P2P exchanges,
Hmm.
and then you lose total control. But if you allow it on regulated exchanges, most of your liquidity will be on regulated exchanges with AML and KYC. So you then sort of get around, like, you kind of counter the most, like the worst use cases of money laundering where you need to move large amounts of money. But if you force it into the dark place and, if it's popular enough, then you're basically only empowering the criminals to use this too. So, well, that's my argument to them, and hopefully they will see kind of like the futility of banning it outright. And I think it's a very useful sort of analogy is like what happened to like Napster and like for example, you try to stop all the music, the pirate thing of music, and then they realize, oh wow, stuff like Spotify and Apple Music or like Netflix, you charge people a reasonable amount and people will pay for it rather than try to engorge people with stuff. Yeah.
That's right. It's not that. This is one thing I've always said about the idea of file sharing and stuff. It's not that people aren't willing to pay a reasonable amount of money, but $25 for a new film or something, it's not really a reasonable amount of money, but $5 maybe, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
if you can make it easy for me to find it and get it, and
Yes.
it's it people are willing to pay for that service, because you go out to the streaming sites and you have the potential of downloading viruses and stuff like this, and it's got all its own problems.
Yeah.
Anyway, I wanted to move on to this idea: cashless societies. There's a lot of people who are like, yeah, cashless societies, and everyone else is saying cashless societies are gonna, give all the power to government. We're gonna be under some terrible control grid, et cetera, et cetera. Where do you fall in the cashless society debate? Because I think privacy coins can play a really interesting part in this conversation.
I mean, definitely the way it seems, because, right now, if you want a cashless society, the government has to move that, right? Because we're in a government regulated system with fiat money.
I know. I think
And
Sweden's planning on the phase out right now.
yeah, and then even like Christine Lagarde, she was talking about like centralized digital currencies, and you can see like China, even like with like cash, like WeChat Pay and things like that, are becoming very, very prevalent. Like I think they're more favorable than cash for most people because it's so convenient. And yes, it does seem convenient to move towards a cashless society, and it does save a lot of costs, like printing those notes and like having those coins does cost the government a lot of money. But it does really raise the privacy concern because it's in effect effectively a centralized system with full vision of how every single dollar has been spent. And I think that's kind of like those sort of dystopian type of future. Like, it's like, yeah, maybe I can't look at your emails, everything's end to end encrypted, but I know every dollar you spend is on what, to who, and how much, and when. So I think it's really interesting that, cashless society is something that people see is very convenient. And it is really convenient because, I don't have to hold like paper notes and coins like that. And obviously it's fun because, you can also have loyalty points connected to this type of e-payment type of systems, which have been really encouraging for people to use. What people don't realize is that with sort of cashless society, it is first of all giving a full eyes view, bird's eye view of every single transaction that's happening. Like I spend, at this place, that place, and how much, and that's actually really, really intimate. And you're trusting organizations and governments to keep this data secure. And I do think that it's quite scary. I mean, of course, they will talk about, oh yeah, we're fighting terrorist activity and money laundering and things like that. But I do feel that I think the privacy risk, basically you letting the government see how its entire population spend money, and I think that's really scary because that's really intimate type of details there. Yeah.
And we know that governments really can't be trusted with this kind of information. I mean, they've continually abused their powers on most of their spying programs that they developed to, catch terrorists and bad people, and then get used on regular citizens, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, like, even if we trust the government's intentions, which may start off honorable, there will be always people with access or factions like that
It's
that
only
can leak this
humans,
data
right?
out. Yeah, and it's not like, oh yeah, just because the prime minister is good, everything will be okay. There will be always subversive elements or like, other state actors trying to break in as well. So I think that's something that you really have to think about before we surrender, move towards a full cashless society.
I think the one thing for me is that the privacy coins themselves are amazing because they are essentially digital cash. That's how I've looked at privacy
Yes.
coins, is that if you want to have the confidence of a transaction of passing somebody money in a dark room where only you and that other person are there, then privacy coins are kind of the answer to that. And that's not to say you're going to do anything bad. That's the thing that people always kind of go to, like, oh, but don't buy drugs and don't get murder for hire and stuff like this. What if I just want to pay my neighbor $10 for some tomatoes, for example? I can just do that and nobody needs to know.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things is like, for example, in US dollars, I believe something like 90 over percent of the money has traces of cocaine on them. And it's not because all of them were involved in drug deals, but the cocaine gets to the money, goes into the counting machine, and then it starts spreading the cocaine on all the
Yeah.
remaining notes as well. And that's the actual taint. Like those coins are actually tainted, but you're not going to arrest everyone who has a note with cocaine. And I guess
Hmm.
one of the essential elements of money for me is that when I receive money, I should not have to care where it has come from, at least for like your regular type of transactions, right? Okay, if you're giving me like $5 million, okay, maybe I'm gonna check something, right? But for like everyday transactions, I should be able to say, yeah, I'm gonna spend this here, I'm gonna spend this there. And that isn't the case with Bitcoin, Ethereum, or any of these coins, because there is the taint actually continues. And
Hmm.
like stuff like Silk Road, like they can actually trace it, several levels down. And I think that's we just imagine if I go to a counter and I receive my pay, like I'm a construction worker, I get my money in cash, and then next thing I go spend it, and then next thing someone comes and say, oh yeah, your money is tainted, I'm going to seize all your money because it has
Yeah. 10
traces on
years
it.
ago, somebody did something bad with that money.
Yeah, and I do think that's, I think it's something that we should not have to care about because or else everything's like tainted and let's face it, like the current systems, who are the biggest money launderers? They're freaking
It's
banks,
the banks. It's the banks.
Citibank
London's
and
the money
whatnot.
laundering capital of the world.
Yeah, so it's kind of hypocritical when people talk about privacy coins and they are the ones that are getting away with actual like money laundering, with just fines. No one's going to jail, and that's the real problem there. Not this like cryptocurrencies at the moment. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy when you think about the implications of these different things. Now, I wanted to switch the chat over just a little bit to actually talk a bit about community, because this is something that's super interesting for me because you're based in Southeast Asia, you're currently in Malaysia. And
Yep.
Southeast Asia is a community that we talk about a lot in the cryptocurrency sphere. And so, can you just give me maybe some of the insights of what I mean, I know there's a lot of countries, a lot of linguistic groups, a lot going on in Southeast Asia. So it's a big place. It's like saying, hey, all of Europe's into cryptocurrency. But, what do you think is really needed to push more adoption of cryptocurrencies in Southeast Asia?
I mean, of course, right now we're still at the infant stages. I think even in terms of knowledge, I would say we're slightly lagging behind the West, right? And mostly people get into cryptocurrencies is to get rich, to get the mad gains. I think even the whole crypto scene, in the at least in 2017 and in parts of 2018 was mainly about getting rich, and maybe you have the really really early adopters of Bitcoin believing in the so-called principles of like decentralized monies and things like that. But one of the things that I find that is really interesting is that um, a lot of the governments in Southeast Asia are a lot more receptive towards cryptocurrencies. Not all of them, but some of them. Like for example, in Thailand, which it's under a military junta, right, at the moment.
Yeah, by the way.
Yeah, and they have been actually, quite embracing of cryptocurrencies. Yes, they're regulating them. They have like license exchanges and stuff like that. But for example, like recently, they're more open to using this type of technologies. Like for example, the Thai Democrat Party, they recently held like it's like equivalent to picking their party leader, like electing Trump as
Internal
the
party elections,
yeah,
yeah.
internal party elections. And of course, like that had to be approved by the General Election Commission as well. But the fact that election of that magnitude, it was a nationwide election with over 130,000 or 127,000 people voting everywhere, and that was conducted on Zcoin's blockchain. And I think that's like a
That's
really
impressive.
interesting. Yeah, and I think nowhere in the world, like even in so-called like more advanced jurisdictions, has a an election of that magnitude or scale has been conducted anywhere else in the world. I mean, there's been small trials here and there. I think in the US they had some blockchain voting, which I think only a couple of hundred people used. So And of course, like, we're seeing Malaysia being, really cautious, classifying everything as a
But just one
security.
question, real quick, before we move on to Malaysia. I'm really interested in what's going on in Malaysia too. I just want to go back to this. I mean, obviously, I've been following Thailand a lot. I've made a few videos to kind of update people what's going on in Thailand with the
Yep.
regulatory scene and stuff. But that voting process, I just want to ask in terms of, I guess, the privacy features. So, if I was a regular Thai dude voting for those party elections, I could send my vote in, have it be authorized as valid, but not necessarily show that it was me that voted. Was that how it worked?
Yes.
That's
So it was
amazing.
really interesting. Like, we of course had to make some compromises because of course we are dealing with an election commission that's used to paper, right? So the way it was actually done is that, well, it's not perfect privacy, but I think it's pretty good enough privacy. Was that all the votes were encrypted and they could only be open if all stakeholders agreed to open it. So, for example, so first of all, the identity data, that means like the KYC documents and whatnot, is one set of keys, which is controlled by a senior Democrat Party member and also a Thai Democrat Party election commission. So you have the identity. That's like, so what? You just know who has voted. Alone, that's nothing, right? But then the actual votes themselves, they need five people to sort of open it, which meant actually the Thai Election Commission, the senior Thai Democrat Party, and the three candidates themselves. So
Mm.
that means that if like one candidate wanted to open it or the election commission wanted to open it, they can't do it because they need the stakeholder approval. Now, actually, we feel that that's really dangerous. We actually recommended 3 out of 5, meaning that if you have 3 of the members, then being able to open the votes. But for some reason, the
Mm.
election commission required 5 out of 5, which was scary because if I didn't want the votes to be counted, I could just lose my key.
That's right.
That's one of the
If there was some kind of thing happening and so, yeah,
yes.
but
Oh,
I
I
mean,
knew.
it's
Yeah.
still exciting to see that as the first implementation. Maybe they'll modify those rules as they go on and say, well, maybe we were being too cautious and this will be the better system. But it's still really cool to see that have happened. I mean, that's massive. 127,000 people voting on the blockchain. That's pretty cool when it comes down to it.
Yeah, and it's not just going to be the Democrat Party has said like this is not the only time we'll be using it because they would be using it for referendums. Like, hey, Democrat Party members, what you think? Instead of just leaving, a few top honchos deciding what everyone else thinks, right? I think that's potentially very powerful. And I wouldn't say that blockchain elections are suitable for all cases. Here where the threat level is kind of like medium-ish, you're not talking about like state level
Mm-hmm.
intervention and things like that. Yeah, blockchain voting makes sense, and especially for referendums, just get gauging interests. I think blockchain voting is really empowering there. But if you're talking about, let's say, like national elections, there's quite a lot of stuff that needs to be solved before this becomes a reality. And it's not a weakness of blockchain technology, but there's just so many layers from the hardware to the software to making sure that the when you press A, it's actually recording A, and those are really difficult issues to solve.
Yeah, as well as getting all the politicians on board to agree to this system.
Definitely.
So that's Thailand. I think Thailand's really been leading, obviously, along with Singapore. Singapore for a long time has been, the bastion of
Yes.
the cryptocurrency industry. Singapore and Thailand have really been leading in terms of Southeast Asia recently. But let's talk about Malaysia. That's where you're currently based. What's the regulatory scene been like recently in Malaysia?
Well, we recently had a government change, and well, with very, very little notice, almost like all digital coins have, or currencies have been classified as a security, which means you need Securities Commission approval to do like trading activities or deal with this type of things. And it's really weird because like Bitcoin's a security, Ethereum's a security. I don't think anywhere in the world this has been the case, right? And it just seems to be like an easy way out to just classify everything as securities. And even now there's even some sort of the Securities Commission has said, yeah, Bitcoin is a security, but if you just use it as payment, it's not a security. So it depends how you use it, then it changes. I'm like, oh God,
Oh, guys,
this
come
is
on. You're
horrible.
killing us.
Uh, so that's the current like right now. I think the 1st of March, like all the exchanges were required to submit their applications to the Securities Commission. There's quite a lot of submissions there, and we'll see how many get approved. But otherwise, so far it seems to be quite permissive, but it does seem to be, I don't know if they've really thought it out before implementing all of this. Like, one of the things I asked, like, okay, so if I'm mining Bitcoin, am I issuing a security, right? And that's something a bit like, ah, man, and it seems like they're kind of making the rules by the seat of their pants sometimes.
Surprise! That's what regulators always do. That's quite funny, actually. Now, recently we've had some very positive announcements out of Indonesia as well, moving towards positive
Yes.
regulatory stances, which is great. But my question would be, there's a few countries that are totally out of the crypto picture in terms of any kind of scene developing there, or anti international recognition, et cetera, et cetera. So you have like Cambodia, you have Laos, you have Myanmar. Um, how do we get these countries that are kind of not part of the scene at all involved in the way in which, like, you see what's going on in Thailand and Malaysia and Singapore and the Philippines and Indonesia? They're all getting on board. Why do you think these three countries aren't really getting in as much? Or am I just seeing that from the outside?
No, honestly, I'm not an expert on those countries. We kind of insulated from them. First of all, I think it's also like a language barrier, right? Like most of the cryptocurrency stuff is all in English. I mean, of course, Vietnam has enough like critical mass and educated people to spread that. I mean, they have really top level developers there. But I don't think that's the same case with like places like Cambodia, and a lot of them are like agriculture based. I don't think many of their concerns are like, oh yeah, let's find some magic internet money or things like that. You do need a certain level of yeah, like exposure to the outside world. And I do find that these countries are quite insular in nature, and maybe that's by design for their existing governments to retain control. So yeah, I think that's about it. I mean, even in Vietnam, when we were speaking at the Vietnam Blockchain Week, as permissive as as such a like Kybers there, and many like other cryptocurrency projects are based in Vietnam, or building the development teams in Vietnam. The Vietnam scene is actually really really scary. Like when we were speaking at Vietnam Blockchain Week, all the scripts. No, we weren't speaking, but other people were speaking. But all the scripts had to be vetted, like every single
Oh,
word.
interesting.
So like Vitalik was there and all this sort of stuff. I was wondering, wow, did they actually also, vet his speech, make sure that everything's on the line? I mean, it's good that they're having the discussions, but it does show that governments are still very wary about this. Yeah.
That's right. They want to know that there's not some challenge to their power. It's, hey, if you guys are doing, doing services to help people or maybe move money around, that's cool. But like, don't challenge the government's power now. We wouldn't want any of that happening.
Mm.
Now, final question here for you today. What are your thoughts on the long-term popularity of privacy coins? I mean, they're such a hot topic. They have been for a long time. Do you think that they're going to continue to be really, really exciting? Or do you see, I guess, kind of a threat to privacy-specific coins like maybe Zcoin, Monero, and the others from new implementations that we see coming in where Litecoin, for example, is going to be implementing Mimblewimble. And so you have these more mainstream coins that may adopt privacy features, and then do you think that the straight privacy coins or the original privacy coins may not be as popular anymore?
I'm actually a bit skeptical about the Litecoin claim. I mean, when like Charlie has been talking about it for quite a while about privacy features, and I think his original idea was confidential transactions. And even before he talked about it, he was just talking about confidential transactions, which kind of makes sense because it's relatively easy to implement. But the problem is that it doesn't really provide privacy. Confidential transactions, all it does is hide the transaction value. It doesn't hide that A transact with B, which is the most important thing. Who is transacting with who?
Mm-hmm.
But you're just hiding the value, which to me is a really half-ass privacy approach. Because I can tell that you're paying something to a fertility clinic, but I just don't know how much you're paying to them, right? And when he was pushed further, he's like, oh, well, we could combine it with coin join, some sort of coin mixer. And then I think probably Beam approached him, oh, yeah, let's make an announcement to work
We're here to
together
help,
on this.
Charlie.
Which I don't know why they're doing that. I mean, I have nothing against Beam. I do think they're like a legit project, in terms of their technology. But why are you shooting yourselves in the same foot, right? It's kind of strange. And I do think that Mimblewimble requires such vast changes to your infrastructure and the way the code is done is that it kind of changes what Litecoin is supposed to be about, which was supposed to be like crypto silver or Bitcoin testnet. And I have serious doubts whether it would actually happen. But even if it happens, I'm actually not so worried because one of the things that people don't understand is that Mimblewimble, Monero, and all this type of things, or even Lightning, I think I would like to spend a bit of time explaining, why privacy like this may not last the long term. And we're not even talking about waiting for quantum technology. We just need to have AI and blockchain analysis because the way Monero and Mimblewimble works is that you are basically trying to hide your transaction in a sea of other transactions. So with Monero, you're mixing with 10, 11, 12 people or so. With Mimblewimble, you're mixing with everyone else that is trying to make a transaction on that block. But that's not going to be like in the thousands or the hundreds of thousands and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. Those are basically 1 in 10 or 1 in 100 or something like that, right? And the thing is that we are humans. We make repeated transactions. We have behaviors. I always use Binance, always pay to this coffee shop. And the whole idea of so when you realize that these things are just hiding, they're not completely hiding, they're just sort of adding noise around it, right? That means your real transaction link is still there. I can still it's like A to B, but then I add a lot of A B C D D D and then like another set of things so it becomes like plausible deniability. But your real transaction is still there. It's like you're not breaking the link. But and if I use blockchain analysis and I see common taint trails, like yeah, maybe this is a decoy, but if I'm making repeated transactions, there are intersections of this, like, oh wow, this seems to like probabilistically all this came from one single source. And there's an excellent video out on this called Satoshi Has No Clothes. It's by Ian Mears from Zcash. And he explains the problems with decoy based transaction systems, and people don't realize this. They say, "Oh yeah, it's from the blockchain. I can't tell anything," and that's not really true. Just from the blockchain, you can tell stuff, and even things like Mimblewimble, even before the transactions are added to the block, you can actually see um, how the transactions are being aggregated together. Well, I guess that's a bit too technical, but
No, that's all right. That's good.
yeah, it's kind of like not just the blockchain is a source of privacy leaks. If I monitor the network, I'm also getting data from there, right? So, like for example, if I look at Bitcoin, I can tell where the IP, I can guess where the IP address originated from, and see. I think it's like a 50-60% chance of getting an IP to a particular transaction.
Wow.
And similarly with like Lightning Network, yes, none of it is stored on chain, but you have all these Lightning nodes that can be recording all the transactions and watching. I mean, now you have things like watchtowers and all this sort of stuff. So people, they're only looking at the angle of privacy on one part, which is storage on the blockchain. And first of all, that's not good enough is if it's a decoy based transaction, but there are also other privacy leaks that people have to think about properly. And that's why like Zcoin has what we feel to be like all encompassing. We use dandelion propagation. We use, of course, if you want to integrate Tor, it works out of the box. You have then your zero knowledge proof, and it all has to come together to have like a privacy suite rather than like, okay, I'm just dealing with blockchain privacy, but I'm leaking like a sieve
Mm-hmm.
in these other areas. So yeah, I mean, that's. I feel that if Litecoin goes in that direction, it kind of changes. Of course, I would say the greatest threat to privacy coin like ours is something like Bitcoin actually implementing good privacy features. But I do feel that because of the way the privacy technology works, where right now there's always some sacrifice in performance and scalability, and also existing institutions. I think that like, heck, they can't even agree on the freaking block size, right? So
Yeah, how are they going to decide to totally change the nature of Bitcoin and
yeah,
add some kind of privacy feature on top of it? Which privacy coin will have another 10 forks if that conversation
yes.
comes up? It'll be crazy.
Well, there's that Bitcoin private and all this other
That's what
stuff.
there's already Bitcoin private. That's right. Then we'll have, Bitcoin ring signatures and Bitcoin
And
Mimblewimble
there's
and
now Bitcoin Zero. Yeah, there's using Zero Coin as well. So yeah.
oh, it's fun times. But I guess what it all comes back to is that there's a lot of different technological implementations, and it's about, I guess, really trying to understand what the technology offers and determining on that scale what your comfort level is in terms of privacy.
Right.
If you're
Yes.
just trying to hide from whoever's looking in casually your
Hmm.
transactions, well, then most of these privacy implementations, like the things that the coin mixers and stuff, that's probably gonna be enough. But if you need like real, like I need like state level protection here, I want the government to not know what I'm doing. Well, they got some pretty advanced tools. So you need some pretty advanced tech to counter that.
Well, I mean, even I'm talking about just like coin mixers. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the kind of people who are going to be analyzing blockchain analysis would be your casual people, right?
Hmm.
So I do have to feel that, like, yeah, don't say, yeah, I have this layer of little protection here that, I'm protecting myself, because the people that you're trying to protect are the people who are actually really looking at like chain analysis and stuff like that, and
They
they're
know
just
what they're
not
doing.
telling you.
Yeah.
Yeah, they know what they're doing. And obviously, especially once you have like artificial intelligence that can just like do things so much faster and identify patterns at scale, those are the those are things that you have to worry about. Yeah, because if you can just do it, like, yeah, computer work on it, I don't have to do much effort. I just have to tweak the algorithm to look at it, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Just come back to my computer. Okay, computer, tell me what Ruben's been doing with his money today, and the
Yeah,
computer will just tell me.
that's right.
It's crazy. Ruben, very very interesting chat. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and tell us a bit about privacy and different implementations, and of course what's going on in Southeast Asia. So it's very interesting. I hope for everyone in the audience. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Lark.